Hey everybody, welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 121. Let me get this mic working right. Here we go. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, everybody? All right, how you doing? Good to be back with you. I just did a show the other day. I figured I'd do a follow-up. You left so many nice comments, and I know how difficult a time it is for a lot of people, especially people who listen to this show. So if I can do anything to ease your burden right now, I'm going to try and do it. So hence the sloppy opening music. You know, I always just pick up an instrument and hope something comes out honest, and that's why it's I never really know what it is. It's just open tuning, picking around. But a lot of times I'm sitting outside writing all day or drawing or something, and I feel like I'm a little rusty, but I can't keep stopping and starting over because it's not the point. The point is to try and express myself to you guys. I don't have an engineer either, so I apologize for the audio. If it's too loud, here we go. This is why I don't always get these out. I don't have an engineer. I'm not complaining. I'm believe it or not, not that great at this stuff. And whatever, you know, it's hard to imagine 2 weeks into this tomorrow how much uncertainty and fear and that's better. I had another mic on. You know, hostility is coming from Trump and the GOP, you know, and it's meant to knock you off your equilibrium. It's meant to upset you. That's the point. They're terrorists. They want to intimidate people. I don't use that word lightly, you know. They're bullies. They're bad guys. They're thugs. That's who won the election. That's what their little trip to the UFC fighting event at Madison Square Garden was about. The bros hanging out on Air Force One, Kid Rock and Don Jr. and Elon Musk and, you know, Mike Johnson, who looks like he's there to carry the bags and buy the McDonald's. They're showing up to sort of, you know, commune with their fellow New York area tough guy, douchebag, toxically masculine demographic. Not that everybody who does that kind of stuff is that way, but a lot of them are. A lot of the people who are attracted to Trump are, you know. I'm not messing on like mixed martial arts or something. Don't come at me because I don't want to have to kick all your asses, okay? But, you know, my point is that's Trump's brand. The Rangers fans, the guys from Long Island, the cops and firemen, and, you know, I know these guys, the contractors. You know, they're decent guys one-on-one. They are. You know, if your house is on fire, they're exactly who you want coming over and putting it out. And, you know, they do a lot of sort of blue-collar, you know, professional services, cops, that sort of thing, union jobs, and they'd been the backbone of the New York area for decades, and I've gotten deep into the dynamics of that before on this podcast, and the reason I did is because I was trying to talk about a cultural phenomena that was growing, that Trump instinctually knew how to exploit and manipulate. That was his brand. That's his demographic. And it grew. He expanded that demographic into Latino voters, you know, some black voters, lots of, you know, non-college degree whites. He picked up votes from unions. He picked up votes in Michigan. He got a lot of the protest vote. People, you know, sat out the election because they were mad at Biden-Harris, and you know, I wish them peace because that ain't going to work out in your favor if you think Trump's going to be better off for your interests in the Middle East or for the interests of humanity, because they're all our interests, right? It's the suffering affects us all, and so does war. And, you know, it was like death by 1,000 cuts, but let's just try to focus on one thing. And why I always focus on that sort of culture, because it's important to me, because I understand it, because I grew up around it. I went to high school with the kind of people that are now voting for Trump. You know, now we're middle-aged. We're in our 50s. We're Gen X. We used to be no bullshit. You know, greed and corporate sellout wasn't for us, and a lot of guys sold out and got greedy. And they've been They've been inundated with fear and messaging from the NRA and the Republicans since I was in high school, since Reagan was in office, and liberals were bad and unions were standing in the way of capitalistic progress and all this kind of bullshit. And it's exhausting to keep talking about it because I've already said 1,000 times how the Rust Belt was created. You know, how deregulation and LBOs and all this stuff on Wall Street that Reagan allowed them to do created the Michael Milkens and the Carl Icahns and all these other scumbags that robbed your future. And then the Sacklers came in and sold you a bunch of pain pills, you know? And decimated what was left of these towns. And then Trump came in and sold you a lifestyle brand. He gave you a false enemy, but it felt good to have somebody to pin your problems on, to have somebody to blame who wasn't the real cause of your problems. The real cause of your problems was guys like Trump. It was Wall Street. It was the Sackler family. And they all made a fucking fortune off of you guys, and now they're picking through your bones for what's left, which is basically your voter cards, right? Your vote was the last thing you had to give these guys, and you gave it to them, and now you're going to have to deal with the consequences, and I don't think you're going to like it far out from here. I think the changes are going to come really fast, and I think people are going to suffer in a big way, and I'm not trying to freak people out. I'm trying to address how we got here, and it's exhausting. You know, there's a big article on the Washington Post and the New York Times about how they plan to attack Medicaid and the SNAP program, which Republicans always do. They always go after that. They always forget that it's mainly white people who get food assistance. There's no shame in it. We shouldn't be letting anybody be food insecure in this country, especially kids, and that's who will suffer. Medicaid, they're trying to institute, you know, these work requirements, which are always bullshit. What they do is they get people kicked off of the health insurance rolls. That's what they did down in Florida. They make people sort of reapply every 6 months. They get them kicked off if they don't fulfill some bullshit like requirement. You know, someone's sick. They're trying to get health care. That's basic human rights. Any other civilized nation gives that to a people. You shouldn't have to think about it no matter who you are. Like, everybody should have some kind of national healthcare program. It's such a nightmare to deal with that stuff. And, you know, most of the people listening to this show know that. I know that. Anybody who's experienced that is grateful for it. I'm grateful to have the ACA. It's the first time I had health care. I'm a freelancer, you know. The first time I had proper health insurance was when Obama got elected. And they gave it to us. And I've paid into the program since, you know. And it's a good thing. And New York State has a good program for that in the exchange, you know. And even dealing with that, it's a nightmare, right? Even getting it, you have to be an advocate for yourself and jump through hoops and all the kind of stuff with authorizations and everything. Like, for-profit healthcare is insane, you know. It should be there as an extra perk. If you're super rich, you can knock yourself out. Go get whatever you want. But everybody should get decent care no matter what. Women, children, men, it doesn't matter. A healthy nation takes care of its people, but they want to go after that first. And that's going to further decimate the communities that went for Trump. You don't think people in, you know, rural Pennsylvania are on Medicare or Medicaid, right? Because they'll go after Medicare next. They'll say Medicaid first because that's easier to sort of like appeal to their base because they'll blame it on minorities and stuff that are getting that. But then they'll go after Medicare, which most Americans rely on. You retire, you get Social Security, and you get Medicare, you know. And if you didn't like strike it big or have a huge, you know, 401k to retire on, at least you got something. And it ain't a lot, and it, you know, and it's not enough as it is, but at least it's something. When that's gone, it's going to be heartbreaking. As I said the other day, I saw a woman who looked to be in her retirement years pushing a suitcase up 8th Avenue in the cold. Looking like everything she owned was there in that suitcase, and it looked like she moved around a lot during the day and didn't have a home to go to at night. Probably went to a shelter or something. That breaks my heart. It always has, and it's only gotten worse, and we can't accept it. And now that it's turned into, you know, a political sport that's being perpetrated and waged by bullies, by men who ran on a platform of zero empathy, of demonizing the other, of appealing to the worst instincts in young men, to be bullies, to be assholes, to think the economy and some swinging dick asshole con man like Trump was going to deliver jobs because they were 10 when he got elected, and they don't understand how budgets work and how much he added to the deficit and how reckless he was during COVID. And now he's rewriting that history, right? He had a tweet this morning that talked about how everyone must recall how wonderfully I handled COVID. No, he didn't. 1 million Americans died. He lied about it to the American people in January, as we heard from Bob Woodward. Okay? He didn't come clean as to what we were facing all through February. In early March, he was keeping cruise ships off the shore because he didn't want the 55 people on it or whatever it was, their COVID positive cases, to go on his watch. He treated it like it was a game because he thought about his own reelection chances. That's all it meant to him. And then he appointed Jared to see if you could make a buck off it. And then when he couldn't do that, they lost all interest. But at that point, it was raging across our globe and through our country. And they didn't do a damn thing to stop it until it was already killing people and they were stacking bodies up in my city in freezer trucks. He didn't do shit to help people in COVID. He made it 1,000 times worse, and there's hundreds of thousands of people that would be alive today if he was not president when he hit. Okay, if Hillary Clinton had been president, if Trump hadn't dismantled the pandemic preparedness office as he did when he came in because Obama had set it up, and he didn't want anything that a smart black man had set up because he was an inferior, mediocre, mook white dude, and his ego couldn't handle it, just like his voters couldn't handle voting for a competent, smart, qualified black woman. They'd rather vote for a white guy that they knew was a clown, that they knew he was a criminal, right? But he was a white dude. He was a big white dumbass, and he talked like their racist uncles and their dumb dads did, right? So they voted for him. And white women voted for him because he made them feel safe because they believed the bullshit, because they spent 20 years watching fucking crime shows every night and thinking somebody's going to break into their house and murder them and their families, right? Because it's worked their way into their subconscious. I wrote about this in Noel's notes yesterday. It's no accident that Rupert Murdoch had Fox News and the news division and also had an entertainment division, right? Fox Entertainment Group, 20th Century Fox. They create a lot of content, and a lot of their content starts out with a crime, right? It's a crime show, CSI or whatever. That's CBS probably, but you get my point, right? What does a crime show do? It begins with a young, usually white, pretty female victim found scantily clad poolside or in a hotel room, and some horrible fate befell her the last night, and some snarky white detective usually stands over her and makes some comment that his sidekick, laughs at, and that's the beginning of the show. It's usually some form of sexualized violence and an objectified woman, at the base of it. We're addicted to violence as a nation. Okay, it's all throughout of our entertainment, and that stuff has an effect, right? It has a cumulative psychological effect because you're ingesting all that kind of fear. Healthy people don't watch that shit. I watch tons of it. I'm not judging you. I'm trying to make a larger point about you sort of are what you eat. So if you're in a culture that's consuming all this fear, that's like, the dramatic arc of every little neat hour is some kind of outsider comes in and damages your white, nice suburban lifestyle. Some killer, some monster's out there. And the only guy who can save you is the patriarchal white man with the badge and technology and law and order, right? When that is the only thing that can save you, you're going to buy the guy who affects that sort of image, who has those sort of trappings. And if your brain is already, sort of infiltrated with that imagery over decades, if that's what you do for entertainment, sitting in your little cul-de-sac, in your ranch house, watching that on your big flat screen, it's going to work on your brain, right? It's just like when I read In Cold Blood, it freaked me out. I live in a little farmhouse. It's not in rural Kansas, but, and there is real crime. I'm not making light of the fact that we're a country that has a lot of crime. And we're certainly a very violent people, right? There's more guns than people in this country. There's like 440 million guns and probably more. Those were the statistics when I was writing about it a year ago. Okay, but I'm trying to make the point that that was the sort of entertainment that was pumped into the brains of a lot of sort of white suburban America. And then Trump comes along and literally gives life to it rhetorically. Hey, migrant gangs are coming in here and they're killing these beautiful young women and they're chopping them up, and that's going to be your daughters. Unless you elect me, they're coming into the suburbs. They're coming for you. They're coming into your schools. They're going to get your kids. Meanwhile, your kids are getting slaughtered in the classrooms, and the NRA and the GOP won't even stand up to them. It's not even on the table. Nobody even talks about it anymore. You know, those thoughts we had for like banning AR-15s, they'll be handing them out, you know, like for free. These guys are nuts. Like, so that's the climate that was created. And Rupert Murdoch's a big billionaire guy on behalf of other big billionaires around the world, and certainly has deep ties with Putin, right? Wendy Dang Murdoch was the one who got Jared and Ivanka to get back together when they'd split up. They split up when I first started working on Celebrity Apprentice. You know, Jared was out of there for a minute because he was grossed out, as most people would be when you first meet Trump, you know. And then Rupert Murdoch took him out on his boat. Wendy Dang separately took Ivanka out. Wendy Dang and Rupert had dated. Wendy Dang and Putin had dated. And they said, think about it, kids. You got an empire to build here. Get back together. So they got back together. A marriage of convenience, but also an influence, right? A handler on Trump. So Trump's rhetoric dovetails with all of this stuff, with Steve Bannon, with Stephen Miller. This stuff is designed. There's a reason, you know, this Secretary of Defense pick, Peter Hegseth, is this douchey ex-army, got white supremacist tattoos on his bicep. You know, they affect this sort of imagery of a Christian warrior and stuff. That's on purpose. There's a reason Opus Dei is behind Bill Barr and half of these whack jobs in D.C. They have this sort of Christo-fascist ideology going for a reason, because that iconography will work on their base. Right? So that image gets married with the fear that Trump is pumping through people's, you know, minds every time he gives a rally. And that when they turn off the politics and they go to entertainment, they're seeing a reflection of the same sort of fear and the same sort of values of who can save you and what it is to be a patriot and what it is to be an American. Do you follow me? Right? It's a branding with fear and ideology and xenophobia all wrapped up into one. And you're serving that up to a people that have been deprived of critical thinking and humanities and real arts, as I talk about. Right? It's like they talk about a food desert in towns. We're like a lot of red state America is a cultural food desert. And that's not to say that there isn't great entertainers. They go through every theater in the country, you know. It just means the fast food of popular entertainment, the fast food of political rhetoric is all based in fear, and it's based in the idea that a white man or a gun or a Bible will save you, and anything that threatens that or goes against that, you should reject and give no quarter to. Just trust us and we'll take care of the rest. And they've won on that platform. The Josh Hawleys of the world are running it now. The Donald Trumps, the Matt Gaetz at AG. I guess last week I said EPA. I meant Lee Zeldin at EPA, which I thought I had said, but I guess I mixed up my words. I make a lot of mistakes on this podcast. I'm just doing this live, hitting record, as you can hear. So I apologize. But you get my point, right? The snarky frat bros are going to be running the land, and they're going to enjoy the suffering of others because it'll feed into what has been working with them. That sort of branding that these people are suffering because they deserve it, because they've hurt you. And hurting people will accept that, right? They'll accept that in the place of real solutions because it's temporary, but it gives them sort of an adrenaline rush, and it makes them feel like somebody's doing something on their behalf. And that was Trump's whole rap with "I'll be your retribution." That's what he meant. And people are like, fuck yeah, I want to see that. Use the government to hurt those guys. Now we're talking. And that's what he's saying he's going to do on day one. He just said last night, he confirmed, he said true or whatever to a tweet from another right-wing asshole guy like this. I don't even want to say his name, Tom Fitton. He blocked me a long time ago, but one of these other Florida douchey, steroid freak working out all the time. Old man MAGA dudes, right? He said, like, Trump is going to weaponize the military to enact mass deportations or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. And Trump said true and retweeted it at 4 a.m. Okay? You don't want a president who's awake at 4 a.m. unless he's been woken up and dragged to the situation room. And that's not the case. He was in Mar-a-Lago with a full head of Adderall and God knows what else, because he probably got some good stuff up in New York over the weekend. He usually does. But, he's waking up talking about deporting millions of Americans and using the military against them and the National Guard. That's not what that stuff is for, and that's not who we are. And even talking about it brings us to a level beneath anything I thought we would sink in my lifetime. Not to mention doing it. And if he attempts to do it, the chaos that will ensue, I don't think anybody's prepared for. And I'm not saying this to scare you or freak you out. I'm saying it to prepare you for the eventuality of this, because he's going to try something because he wants the headlines, and he's going to be afraid to walk away from it, and he's got too many freaks that want it to happen and is whispering in his ear, your Stephen Millers and your Stephen Bannons, and he puts in a Matt Gaetz or somebody. He's got the Justice Department in his pocket. He already does. Let's be real. And these guys are going to confirm them. It would be hard to imagine the Senate standing up to him at this point. I really don't see it. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to be aware that you probably live in a place where some people are going to be damn fine with it. And they're going to say, good, those guys are criminals. They deserve it. Little blonde school teachers will say that. I see them on Facebook. I live in an area where the people agree with this shit. And they put up all their memes with their flags and their Trump trains and stuff and celebrated after Election Day. They think it's a good thing. They think they're the good guys. If I've been trying to explain anything, it's that. You have to put yourself in their shoes. Everything about Trump and their culture is reinforced in their daily lives, right? They go to softball practice. Johnny Fireman, who's over there watching his kid, has a Trump t-shirt on, and, they go to the deli, and the Trump guy making the deli sandwich is into it, and they've all bought into this. He's remade suburban America in his image, and it was easy to do because a lot of it was just strip malls and dumbassery and dominoes, and it's pretty white bread out there. The irony of it is that in all those places, there's Latin communities, there's Southeast Asian people, there's Muslims, there's all kinds of rich things just around the surface, but we've become so divided that people don't avail themselves of that culture. They don't drive through those towns and say, hey, look, this is great. Look, these guys are moving in. They got a party shop. They got a food store they open. They got a little restaurant. They're really acclimating, but they're bringing their own flavor. That's awesome. We need that. They don't say that. They say, look at this. When I was a kid, that was all white. And that's how Trump talks. I've heard him talk that way. My friends have heard him talk that way. That's the way he talked on The Apprentice. NBC knew he talked that way. NBC knew he used the N-word. Okay? Anybody who worked on that show did, and anybody who says he didn't is lying, or they weren't close enough to him to hear it. And Morning Joe goes with Mika and kisses his ass at Mar-a-Lago this morning. They drive over from their own mansion a half an hour away in Florida, and they kiss the ring. They might try to package it like it's part of the resistance. They obeyed, as Timothy Snyder would say. They obeyed in advance because they saw who he picked as an FCC head last night, and that guy is Elon's little boy. He's in Elon's pocket. He's going to do whatever Elon says. He's going to steer a couple of billions of dollars in government contracts to Starlink, and he's going to go after their enemies. And Morning Joe is a business, and he was a Republican. People forget he was a Republican congressman, So, it's a business, and the businesses want to get paid, especially the big corporations. So they're all going to line up to do his bidding or they're going to continue the illusion of resistance, which is essentially a podcast on TV with a bunch of never Trumpers, talking smack, but not really saying anything too damning. That's why you never heard about him doing Adderall. That's why nobody really did a deep dive into all the sexual predation, all the weird shit that's happened in his career, the dead executives in the helicopter that he whacked in '89. The Russian money laundering in Trump Tower. He got away with it all. He got away with stealing classified documents and hiding them in his fucking bathroom. He got away with January 6th, and he's going to rewrite that history. Don't kid yourself that that's going to appear in a textbook, anything like what actually happened in reality. All of this is going to happen and more. And you got to understand how we got here as a people. What inside of us is broken enough to allow this to happen? And what are the forces that distracted us and allowed it to happen? Where did we give our attention where we shouldn't have? How much time did we spend online retweeting and following and feeling like we were part of the resistance, and really we were just in a trap? We were just preaching to the choir. And that's still going down. That stuff's still going strong. People are still making a lot of money off of your attention and rage farming you and follow me back and don't be sure to miss a thing and let me break down the news for you. You don't need any of that shit. You need to break down the news for yourself, okay? You need to really get sober and clear-eyed about what's happening. Nothing is funny anymore. If you see people laughing on the news, change the fucking channel, because this stuff is serious now, okay? That's not dissing on comedians, okay? We need humor. I'm not saying don't have wit and brevity and laughter in your life, okay? But keep it short and simple, and don't get misled on what's really going down here. The outrage du jour that Trump's going to come up with, and all the punchlines that are going to be repeated on the Tonight Shows and all this crap. This is the third time around, right? It's the third election. Second time he's won. Second time he's going to be president. It's not going to be the same as the first time. You're not going to have free reign to talk smack about him on TV. And they were tame the first time. They made fun of him enough that he's going to go after him now. Do you think anybody is going to go after and do deep dives on the real stuff? Do you think there's any editors signing off on that kind of reporting at the Washington Post or the New York Times right now? You think there would be another revelation like Russ Buettner and Suzanne Craig, their Pulitzer Prize winning reporting that uncovered all the scams that his businesses were and his father's businesses were? They got all that from Mary Trump, generously giving up the documents she had and stuff. You think that would happen again? I just heard from an agent today. I'm not trying to sell anything. He's just somebody who communicates with me, and we were talking about a project, and he was like, yep, I don't think any of the big publishing houses are going to be doing too many Trump books anymore. There was a bumper crop of them the first time. It didn't make a difference. But the larger point I'm trying to make is corporate media is going to back off. They're going to acquiesce. They already did in the lead up to the election because they could see the writing on the wall. A lot of us couldn't, right? Because we were caught up in the hope and perhaps the hype. But what choice did we have? Kamala ran a great campaign. She didn't have a lot of time. I don't have time to get into all the, behind the scenes stuff that went down. And there'll be a lot of books written on that, I promise you. Maybe I'll even write one. I have a fictionalized thing I'd like to write about that, about that whole influencer world, because a lot of this stuff sort of starts out well-intentioned and then turns into this narcissistic thing where the algorithms take people over, and they're so concerned with pumping out content all the time because that's how you stay relevant and how you make a buck, that I think they lose their own originality and creativity, if any of them even had it in the first place. Most people just retweet what they hear other people saying, and that creates a void, right? Because people aren't really focusing their talents on the problem and coming up with the unique solutions that we need. We need all hands on deck. We need all voices involved. We don't just need a curated group of voices that have sort of artificially inflated themselves to speak for everybody else. That didn't work, okay? And there's a, that machine is in place, but that did not deliver results. And all you have to do is open your paper and go look at the poll tracker part, and you'll see that I'm correct on that. If it worked, it would have changed the needle. It never did. PACs are cute. They're fun. They make the people who run them a living. They don't really change anything, and you need to know that. Do I have an answer? What would work instead? I don't, but I'm thinking about it, and you should too. That's all I'm saying. We can't do anything business as usual, because a lot of what got us, into this situation is still out there, and it's not working, and you don't want to just continue doing the wrong thing and going down the wrong path. And that's, it's hard to make those points and not get into, he said, she said, or Monday morning quarterbacking. I'm not interested in that at this time. I'm not interested in, Dems are too woke. No, fuck that. Lean into the wokeness, okay? You don't change the world by becoming more like what you can't stand, okay? Inclusivity, equality, justice, those are all things to fight for. You don't pull away from that. You don't turn your back on transgender Americans or children or any of that shit, or immigrants or whatever, to appeal to a bunch of uneducated voters in some rural part of some state you never visit anyway. Okay? And if you live there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And those people are praying that a Democratic Party comes along and holds up the ideals that we should stand for, because they're going to be the ones getting terrorized, getting bullied, having to hide in the shadows. Freedom is not having to live in the shadows. It's nobody's business who you love. What is the public business is making sure you are protected to love whomever you want to love, as long as it's not harming anybody else. Any kind of marriage, any kind of relationship, any kind of way you want to identify and dress is fine. That is what being an American is, living your truth, not in some homogenized, dictated, hypocritical way that's dictated to you by some white, Christian MAGA dude who's living all kinds of bullshit behind the scenes, right? That's why all these guys are sexual predators. Half of the guys that Trump appointed are all scumbags. They're all doing what Trump did because that's his MO. That's why he's not going to fire that, Hexit's guy or remove his name probably, because he's like, hey, that's what I do. He got her to sign an NDA. He paid her fair and square. No harm, no foul. Guys who have women sign NDAs, they're predators for sport. They do it for sport. That's what Donald Trump did for decades. That's why he had off-duty NYPD as his security guards to further intimidate his victims. And that's why he had lawyers draw up contracts and cut a check to his victims and have them sign NDAs. Okay? That was his MO. That's what he did. And some of his famous lawyers talk about paying off the mistresses, on their podcasts or whatever. He's a scumbag. Okay, he's going to have other scumbags around him because he wants that leverage. Compromat is part of his deal. He doesn't trust, it's like you're an old hippie. You don't trust straight guys. You're using drugs or whatever. I don't mean straight guys like sexually, like a square, right? He doesn't want squares around him. He wants to know you're corrupt, and he wants to feel you out right away. And that's what he does. Everything that he communicates to you is designed to see how well he can manipulate you. First, he charms you. Oh, you're very famous. You're well liked. Then he finds out what your tastes are, and he tries to get in there and then get some compromise and leverage over you. And he's been very successful at that. I've talked about that a million times. I don't need to hit you over the head with that, but that's the MO. So now you got a whole cabinet full of people that corrupted with him holding leverage over them. We don't know what that's going to look like. It's not going to be pretty, but we're in uncharted waters in terms of that, especially when you superimpose an Elon Musk on top of that. Then it's just completely batshit crazy. And my question is, it's going to be so ridiculously corrupt, we're going to make, post-Soviet Russia look like child's play. Because it's similar to Yeltsin, right? Yeltsin was drunk all the time, and all these other guys, Berezovsky, they were all going in there. Abramovich, they were dividing it up. Berezovsky, it's hard to say his name, Boris. You know what I'm talking about. The beginning oligarchs, the guys who own the TV stations and had it going and had Yeltsin propped up, and things were going great. And then they picked Putin, he came in and he changed up the game. And if you weren't serving him, you were out of there. And he wanted his piece. It'll be the same way with Trump. You start making too much money under his watch, he's going to want a piece, or you're going to be out. And there'll obviously be some conflict with Musk, because Musk is so crazy. And people seem to allow him to get away with all his bullshit in the same way they let Trump get away with his. They get cowed immediately almost. And they're such freakish like dudes that it's hard to imagine that happening, but that's what happens. So his level of corruption and entanglement in our government, I mean, I don't know what that leads to. He had a private meeting with an Iranian figure, Musk did last week, like to discuss possible peace in the Mideast. Like, that's insane. Forget about it's a violation of the Logan Act. Nobody enforces that anymore. Trump is taking calls from world leaders. Joe Biden is still the president last time I checked, but he's wandering off into the rainforest. No, I love Joe, man. I hope Joe, I mean, good thing he allowed those attack cams, however you say them, those long-range missiles to be used in Ukraine. Good, because Putin's terrorizing Ukraine, because he knows what's coming. He knows they're going to pull support. He knows J.D. Vance, it's going to be the first thing he gets his boss to do and tries to get in front of the Senate with. And they're all going to play along because they're all compromised. Can you picture any of them standing up at this point? Even the ones that were for Ukraine and understood what it meant to our democracy to defend a democratic ally in Europe? Are they still going to be there standing up? Lindsey Graham or somebody like that? Of course not. Marco Rubio is the most normal one they have. And I'm not a fan of Marco. I'm just saying he's the only one that even has any experience. You're going to have a guy in charge of the Department of Defense who's a TV show host who has no experience managing that many people and that many different agencies, and they're branches of the military. Okay, you got to know your shit when you get involved in this stuff, just like you got to know your shit when you enter into geopolitical affairs. Elon Musk does not know enough about the situation to be sitting down with Iranians. Okay, people spend their lifetimes studying this sort of diplomacy. My grandfather was an NSA agent. He knew like an ancient form of Arabic or Farsi. He was an analyst. He spent his whole career at the NSA, and he lived in Saudi Arabia and Cyprus and all over the Mideast, and he worked with the Israeli intelligence, Americans supporting Israeli intelligence and Saudi Arabians and stuff. And like, these were complicated problems for guys like that. He's a guy, Phi Beta Kappa from Harvard after the Navy, spent his life in Glen Burnie and overseas working in, on our nation's behalf, right? In a sober, serious way, because that's how this shit gets done. It gets done by the John Kerrys of the world who had a deal with the Iranians that Trump blew up. And now he wants to prosecute John Kerry again, who he tried to prosecute the first time, because they're mad at intellectualism. They're mad at sort of the establishment that's smart and does things the right way, because they're so arrogant and they're so adolescent in their thinking that they think they can make a difference because they get a lot of laughs on Twitter. So Elon Musk thinks, oh, I'm a good negotiator. Trump thinks he's a deal maker. He's not a deal maker. Every world leader sees him coming from a mile away. KSA put his picture up on the side of the building when he landed in Saudi Arabia, gave him an orb dance and a sword dance, and they owned his ass. They literally own half of his golf clubs now with his golf tournament. They own Jared Kushner, and they're going to come collecting. They're going to say, hey, remember my $2 billion? That's why you don't have compromised people in our government. That's why if you're in enormous debt, you don't get a security clearance, because you're more likely to get bought off. You needed guys like my grandparents who owned their homes, who didn't care, who weren't motivated by money, who were doing it because it was the right thing to do. That's what you want in government. You want people that are going to make a comfortable living, live out in the suburbs in Virginia, in Maryland, and get up every morning and drive to the USDA or the Department of the Interior or the EPA or wherever they've spent their life working on a specific problem or a specific administration of regulations that our agencies exist to make sure it's a clean clean, safe environment for industry and agriculture and commerce in this country, right? And no one company can spoil the lands or the rivers or whatever, or create a monopoly or do all these kind of things that left unchecked, business and capitalism will do. If there's a regulation in place, as I say all the time, somebody probably died and suffered to get it there. And their family probably lobbied a congressman to begin with and worked their way up to the ladder before it became law and was adopted by an administration, or by, an administration, right? An agency is what I mean. It's like we've built something that's very valuable that a lot of people would envy, that is working relatively good. Sure, there's problems, but, the bureaucracy is your friend. You saw that in the rollout of the vaccines. I teared up when I went to my National Guard headquarters in Yonkers and got my first booster shot, because it was an example of government coming together and doing the right thing. And a lot of people, a lot of anonymous people making it happen, people that you'll never meet, looking out for the greater good, not for themselves, not to become stars, not to claim credit, but to do the right thing. That's what you want in our government. You want people dedicating their lives, applying their talents in a sort of boring, wonkish way. It's not let this guy come in here and slash everything up and let Elon Musk take $2 trillion out of our budget. What that means is grandma's sleeping under a bridge and eating cat food in 15 years, and doesn't have any health care. That means people walking around with tumors on them. It means people dying early. It means little kids not getting the care they need, or a hot meal, or any kind of food, or even a shelter or home. I've seen all this stuff when it worked, right? I've seen the suffering of people that get marginalized and left behind my entire life. I saw it when we had people who actually still cared in the government, and how hard it was to get the proper health care and, rent assistance, food assistance, whatever it is you need. I've seen people suffer in poverty. It's never been a picnic in this country, but we've always had, somewhat of a government watching our back, at least from FDR on. Now, we may not. That may all be dismantled. The irony of that, too, is Trump's dad made his fortune basically off of the New Deal. He got FHA low-interest loans, that were part of, after World War II, the government spent a bunch of money to get low, housing for returning GIs and their families. So Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, all this stuff. They needed a bunch of cheap apartments for all these GIs to come back and live in and start a family. Trump's dad stepped in, availed himself of government largesse, got these loans for free, basically free money, and built all these, apartment buildings in the New York area. And that made Trump wealthy. And of course, his dad cheated on his taxes and screwed over his tenants and refused to rent to blacks, and all the things we know about, and double build and build them for upgrades on the building, and was just generally a horrible person like his son is, just took advantage of the situation. Trump's mom was an immigrant. She was 17 years old. She came here on a boat from Scotland and cleaned people's toilets in Long Island, living with her sister until she met his dad. Okay? So they've all been in the mix of what they're demonizing immigration, government programs. They were made wealthy off it, and they want to pull up the ladder, which is the same mentality that I see people in the suburbs having. To circle back to my original point, that's why I keep talking about this culture, because people don't understand where they're coming from and what they've done and how they've gotten a helping hand. People get very complacent, and very entitled. Just because everything isn't the way it always was, you don't understand it. And you think, you're aggrieved and someone owes you something. The world changed. Globalization happened. You needed different skills. You weren't going to make $65 an hour, in a factory, or $45 an hour, because you voted for Reagan and he offshored that shit. So now you got to go learn computers or something. You got to adapt. You got to accept that the demographic of your area is changing, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because we need new life. We need new culture. We need new ideas. We need new talents, because what was there in its place has been fed so much toxicity and so much poison that you guys are voting for a criminal at this point. A guy who can't even talk, a guy who stands on stage and sways to music for 45 minutes, a guy who coordinated a fake assassination attempt so he could have a campaign commercial to show you, okay? There's no way that shit was real. I'm not saying somebody didn't die, they did, but I know Donald Trump and the way he reacted to that thing, he knew that was coming. That's why they ran that ad to death and that imagery, okay? You fell for that shit. You got bamboozled like a motherfucker by Donald Trump. So you need an overhaul, because that attitude of moving out of the cities and up to the suburbs and turning your back on immigrants, even though your grandparents and great-grandparents came from Ireland or, Italy or somewhere else, just like mine did or some of mine did. We're all immigrants, You don't demonize the latest guy to get here. You say, welcome aboard. What are you good at? What do you want to do? I bet I can help get you a job. You help somebody make it in this country, you got a friend for life. They're not coming here to steal, to rob you. That kind of rhetoric was so awful and disgusting, and it worked. He said people are eating dogs and cats, and it worked. It was like base psychological profiling. I swear he got it from Putin or whatever, and so much of it was designed to appeal to the complacent, scared, white woman, white man, and I know there's plenty of awesome Democratic white women that hate Trump and stood up to him. I'm speaking in generalizations, and I'm speaking specifically off of the poll numbers and things that I saw in the election results that I want to speak to, because I know these people and I understand how it came to be to some extent, right? It's because he's a good guy to them, and they're the good guys, because they haven't been told that they've sort of been robbed and lied to for a long time, and a lot of their culture is false, and a lot of the shit they worship isn't as, patriotic as they think it is. They have to learn to look at things from a different angle. And if they're watching Fox News and all this crap, it almost feels like there's no hope for them. I do a better job on my Substack of explaining this. It's called Fear Inoculum. I named it after a Tool song. All of my articles are named after songs or albums. So if you like this podcast, I'll put in the comments, I'll put a link to the to that Substack. It's free to sign up for Noel's Notes. You just put your email in there. The people who've gotten paid subscriptions, you're funding everything I'm doing. So that's my job, and I appreciate it, and I couldn't do it without you. It means so much to me. The people who've signed up, to support this podcast. If you want to listen to it commercial free, you can do it on Patreon. It's like $5 a month. I could even start throwing the videos up there if you wanted, or throw some artwork. I wish I had some to grab. It's on the other side of the room. Some people have expressed interest. But, it's creating that kind of stuff and having these dialogues that we change that. That's my hope, right? Because we got to change people that are in the suburbs and have sort of been lied to or fed Wonder Bread for 20 years and 30 years. And we got to say, hey, man, that's not how this stuff went down. You're getting lied to. Women's rights should matter to you. You don't want to turn your daughter's health care over to Ted Cruz. Trust me. Right? So, musical performances, visual arts, theater, all of these things can exist out in these same red states where all of this happened. And we got to mobilize and move in and do it. Just like in the 60s, right? A lot of the anti-war movement, it was fed by folk songs and stuff. Bob Dylan going down to the South helped kick off a lot of the civil rights movement in terms of how you got white college kids from the North getting involved. They'd hear about it in a Dylan song because he'd go down there and play and see what was going on, and he'd write about it. That's how I learned about a lot of stuff. I'm younger than that, but Lonesome Death of Haiti Carroll. Is that her last name? William Zanzinger. That guy, this is super obscure. I don't think anybody who listens to this is even going to get this, but I was born on the eastern shore of Maryland, and William Zanzinger was a wealthy scion in Baltimore, and he was at a party. His dad was like the mayor or some rich guy in town, and he hit an African American woman who was there, like working, as a servant or something, serving drinks or something, and he didn't like something she did or said, and he hit her with his cane on his head. And he had a walking stick with like a hard thing on the end or something, and she died. He killed her, and he got away with it. And Bob Dylan wrote a song about it. So when I was like 21, I lived in D.C. I was born on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, Chestertown, Maryland. And William Zanzinger died then, right? This is like the early 90s. And when he died, he still lived on a piece of land on the Eastern Shore. And he basically still had sharecroppers. After he died, they went onto his land and found like there was people there living in almost like tar paper kind of shacks, working his land that he'd continued to exploit for another couple of decades. That's mind-blowing, right? That's America. Right? The privileged class has abused people forever. But when they do it with the support of the underclass, it gets very scary. And that's what Trump has tapped into, right? He's representing elitists and billionaires and people with more power and money than most of us could ever hope to have, right? But he's doing it by pretending, he's a friend to the working man. And that's scary. That's a terrifying thing. So I'll just leave you with a little nightmare. Anyway, that's a wrap. I just wanted to get back on here and talk a little bit, let you know. I appreciate all you guys. 65 LG. So I hope that wasn't too much. I hope I didn't say many things wrong. But we all got to speak our minds, and keep your heads up. It's all going to, it all is what it is. I'm not going to say it's all going to be all right, but odds are you're probably all right in the moment, and when things get overwhelming, that's the best thing to do. Just look down at your feet, see where you are in this moment. Take a deep breath. The sky's going to be blue tomorrow. The birds are going to sing. There'll be stars out tonight. We had that amazing moon, that beaver moon. I like a good beaver moon. That was the super moon the other night. Anyway, there's a lot of beauty in the world. There's a lot of love. The thing is now we got to make more of it, There's not enough to go around at the moment. It's not enough of it that it hasn't changed enough hearts and minds, And that's ultimately, that's what that election was. It was a failure of love in a way, Like civic love for your fellow man. People were willing to turn their backs on other people. That's never a good thing. Don't encourage it. Resist it every chance you can get. All right, that's enough for now. I love you guys. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon. Peace.